The other thing I wanted to talk about, which I suppose is related to NASA, is this whole planetary protection thing.
Yeah,
Which,
interesting.
yeah, very interesting. I mean, Elon did mention something right about it? Was
Yeah, so it wasn't in his main talk. It was in like the press conference afterwards.
Yeah,
And
was
he's
it when they asked questions and stuff?
yeah, it was like a Q press. No, it wasn't in the Q&A from the actual talk.
Okay,
Jesus Christ,
I
that was fucking shambles.
what? Yeah, I was just about to say, what the hell was going on in that? What sort of people do they let ask questions? They should have vetted them.
It's a bit like Comic Con. I don't know if you ever watched like a Comic Con panel, and they
Yeah,
had these
and
like
yes,
the
yeah,
properly nutty fans standing up and just being like, I love you. And I always think,
yeah.
do you think that you'd want to come with me on holiday somewhere? I don't know, some stupid shit like that. Didn't they have someone was like talking about Michael Cera and like what else was in there? I mean, it made me
Yeah, there was.
cringe, man.
Yeah,
And Elon's face, he just sort of stood there like looking, and he's famously like a no bullshit kind of guy, like don't waste my time kind of thing. I think at least in his sort of work and in his companies, that's the way he runs his companies. So you can just imagine him
yeah,
like, yeah, no essays. He was saying no essays, just questions.
yeah. It was a bizarre set of questions. Some of them were just normal questions.
Yeah, there were
Um,
some good ones like embedded in there,
yeah,
but yeah. So planetary protection, he was asked about this in the follow-up press conference, which I think happened basically right after it, right after the talk. And we talked about this on our "Should We Colonize Mars" episode, right?
mm,
And I mean, it's an important thing. We don't think it should stop us going and stop us colonizing, but also we have the potential to answer some like pretty massive questions about life, specifically about life. Um, Using Mars as a really, really useful comparison to the Earth. And obviously, if we just go there with thousands and thousands of people and tons of ships and machinery and farms and all that crap, then we might be hindering our chances of making those discoveries. So it's an interesting question. And actually, what Elon came out and said was basically like, I'm not worrying about it. He said, we've not really seen any sign of surface life on Mars. There's clearly nothing on the surface of Mars. There may be subterranean bacteria. I suspect they're pretty hardy, and there's not much we could do to take them out, even if we wanted to. So that's what we're really talking about in terms of planetary protection. And then he said, like, the planet we should be considering to protect is Earth, and that's why we need to back up, humanity and all that stuff.
yeah.
Which is
That's quite
cool.
an. Yeah, that's. I mean, the based on the plans that they've set out for the ITS, right? They can't really take the planetary protection thing in quite a strict way as probably the planetary protection experts would like them to, because the timelines just don't allow it.
Yeah.
But
I
having
mean,
said that, that statement is quite it's almost discarding it, really.
yeah.
I mean, to be honest, that you read that over, he's basically saying that. I mean, I'm not quite sure they're pretty hardy. That's not. I feel like that's not really relevant. Yeah, they're probably pretty hardy, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about infecting or in any way
Contamin-
changing a potential extant biosphere.
yeah.
Not whether we're going to kill them.
Yeah. We're not, yeah, it's not, yeah. Which makes you wonder if he's kind of missed the point of that in a way.
Yeah,
Because it's not like we're worried about damaging the environment, in a way that people worry about sort of deforestation or environmental damage on Earth. It really is. I mean, I'm sure there is a bit of that in planetary protection, or some people have that kind of outlook with Mars. But really, the real kind of important thing is protecting it scientifically, making sure that we can answer the questions we want to answer before we just turn the whole planet into Earth number two.
yes, and it's tricky because it's almost like I think he's right in terms of the surface stuff. I think as long as what you really need to be focusing on is keeping things at the surface and trying to minimize any infiltration of any fluids or anything into the subsurface of Mars.
Yeah,
That's where we're probably going to best answer our question. On the surface, yeah, he's right. I mean, there's no signs of surface life. It's just not a habitable place generally. The surface of
no,
Mars is it. So I'm not particularly worried about that in the contamination sense. But I do think they should think seriously about how they might dispose of liquids or these types of things. Like I think there should be a serious discussion with astrobiology people, with companies like SpaceX who are setting these things up, that what you're doing is great, and we can use the technology you're developing to answer some really interesting scientific questions, and we'll help pay for this for that reason. But in order for us to do that, and in order for humanity to gain this knowledge, that's really important, we should work together to try and minimize the risk that you could be contaminating the groundwater or whatever
Yeah.
in somewhere like Mars. I feel like the risk can be, they shouldn't discard it. You can engineer the risk again, like you can with anything, and try and mitigate it as much as possible.
Yeah, this is what we said during our Mars episode, the colonization episode. I think we came to the conclusion that we want it to happen, and it would be cool. It's a really important thing to happen, the colonization, but it needs to be done with a measured, sort of careful approach for this reason. And
Yes.
a body like NASA might be their role in it, as well as doing actual science and things, and paying a bit of money towards it. But basically
Yeah.
being like a regulatory body for how best to minimize the impact of the colony before we know the answers to some of these questions. I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
saying that forever they're going to have to live really carefully and minimize all their impacts on the planet, because ultimately, once you have like millions or a million or more people on Mars, it's going to be really hard to just police that. How are you going to stop them doing what they want to do? But in the early days, there needs to be a real, I think there needs to be a real effort. And if SpaceX's attitude is kind of what Elon said, then it might be useful to have someone like NASA on board to kind of like hold the reins a bit on that.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to handcuff SpaceX and prevent them from trying to achieve these goals. It's more
No.
like you just need to try and integrate some of this thinking into the way that they go about solving their problems, and designing the habitats or the ships or whatever.
Yeah, and I think it's tricky because I totally want this to happen as quickly as possible, and it's going to be amazing, the whole colonization thing. And as you said, we don't want to handcuff SpaceX at all. Don't want to end up NASA being that kind of like annoying, like, oh, we gotta go and do this stupid planetary protection stuff. It's like, for fuck's sake, it's just a fucking rock. Just don't worry about it. But at the same time, like, this is a massive question: origin of life. How common is life in the universe? We don't know the answers to these questions. How did life begin on the Earth?
Yeah.
These are huge, huge questions. Some of the biggest scientific questions we've ever asked. And Mars can teach us about it. Even if it is sterile, it can teach us about it. So,
Absolutely, yeah. If anyone's interested in a bit more about this, we did a couple of episodes of off-world, off-topic episodes, which are in a playlist on YouTube. You can find on was there life on ancient Mars, and is there life on Mars today? And also, we did that colonization episode as well about Mars. So there's a lot more information in there if anyone wants to hear us blab about that stuff for a few hours.
yeah, we did a lot of blabbing, but so ultimately, I think, in the early days of this, I think naturally there will be some integration of planetary protection concerns. I think they won't be as stringent as they are now. They just can't be. If you send humans there, you already sort of, shot yourself in the foot in some ways, because people are dirty.
Although, like we said before, there's lots of stuff in the rock record on Mars that wouldn't be impacted by modern day stuff particularly. So you could go back and look at the ancient Mars habitable environments and work those things out. Most of the concern would be for modern extant life.
Yeah, and actually, it's actually more likely that what we would find would be ancient fossils of stuff anyway, or like signatures of some kind. That's probably more likely what we would find, but we just don't know for sure. So that's why we need to have this measured approach in the early days. And it might be that, as time goes on and more scientists end up on Mars, and we learn much more about the planet.
Which we can do thanks to something like the ITS.
Yeah, that we feel like then, okay, it's less of a risk now to start doing some slightly more major, I don't know, modifications of whatever we want to do. So exactly. That's the thing. It's not going to be, I don't think these guidelines are going to be around forever on Mars. It's just an initial thing.
I think, let's not squander the opportunity to answer or damage our ability to potentially answer some very interesting questions about the planet. Even if they do infect some groundwater on Mars, I wouldn't be surprised if it's doesn't. You can still answer that question by visiting other parts of the planet.
Yeah, and it
But
might well be really easy to separate out what's clearly
exactly,
Martian life from terrestrial life and stuff. That might be really easy. It might be like, holy shit, look, what the hell is this thing? It's got like like a code, a genetic code used with like 5 bases or whatever instead of the 4 on Earth, and it doesn't use proteins in the same way, or something really weird like
yeah,
that.
but
It's just
of course, the opposite is it might be very easy. I suppose you might end up with something that this if there is any extant life on Mars, it might be in very very low concentrations in very very sort of nutrient poor waters, and when you get there and you chuck a load of Earth life in there, it's just like we can't separate out what's going on in here because there's like all this junk DNA and there's all this other stuff that's been, what I mean?
Yeah.
Modern environments on Earth are so complicated. It's so hard to separate out, what's going on. It may make it tricky to answer some questions. That's the concern.